Hey everyone, this is Alan with EARMILK. You are tuning in to another episode of EARMILK Chats. I am here with the one and with the only Lava Laroo. Welcome, Lava. How are you doing today?
I think if you go one more time, I'll be even better than I was 2 seconds ago. Oh my god, I'm doing so good, mate. I'm even better now. I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I was just telling Bert, this is super exciting for me. I've been a fan since 2020, 2021 when you dropped the Little Butterfly EP. That was one of my favorite projects of that entire year. So seeing you go from that EP to this giant like grand film of a project is super exciting to see. So thank you for making the time to chat with me today.
All good?
Awesome. Now, starting with our first one. Now, this is the debut full length project, not an EP, not a mixtape. Aside from it being your debut with Dirty Hit, I want to ask you, what were the hardest road bumps when crafting this project?
Um, yeah, I took my time to make it. It was made over the course of like 2 years. It'll be 3 years, yeah, when it comes out next week. So yeah, 3 years basically. And I think um I had this concept and sticking with this sort of like concept and like basically committing to the bit for 3 years has been really fun. And also like, seeing where I can make that grow and expand and not restricting myself. I think when you have a concept album, you can be so stuck in that like you don't also grow with the times. It was like having this concept that younger me kind of conceptualized years ago, but with the world changing, seeing where that project could also grow and breathe with the world. The world is a very different place now that I'm releasing the album to when it was when I was writing it. And I think, yeah, just making it adapt was like a challenge, but also really fun because I got to grow with it too.
Beautiful, thank you. I really like that phrase. You started off with a bit and you've committed to it for the last 3 years. That's
Out of everything I said, me being like I committed to the bit was was the one that stuck with you. I like
everything
that.
very beautifully said, but just as a silly little guy that also commits to the bit, like that's
Yeah.
wonderful to hear. And
No, I like that.
it's really crazy to see that bit like expand into different avenues of your life. Just doing the research for this, we're gonna get into it all later, but seeing the whole Starface concept be integrated in like your fashion world in the fashion world, your directing, like it's just really funny, like it's cool to see that bit expand it to other avenues. Now, moving on from that, Dirty Hit is a fantastic label that really suits your style of music and your creative outlook. Now, I know you joined them right after finishing your time with Marathon, but how did this move to the label happen?
It was pretty like a funny story actually. The guy who owns the label, Jamie Oborn, I met him at a gig. We were like, I guess we must have followed each other online, but I didn't really know what he looked like. And yeah, we met downstairs in a pub at a Dora Jar show. And that day or that week, there was a petrol shortage in the whole country. There was a big issue. It was like something to do with the war in Ukraine and like the oil we get in Russia. And there was this big thing where there was like no petrol, really hard to get any transport, and I just couldn't get home. And I was trying to like order myself an Uber and I couldn't. And then this older dude comes up to me and is like, "Hey, you're Lava, you live in West London, right? I can drop you home." And at first I was going to be like, who's this person? And then I saw he was like with his daughter, and like some people I knew seemed to know him. And he was like, "Oh, I'm Jamie, by the way." Like, the guy who owns Dirty Hit kind of vibes. And I was like, "Oh shit. Yeah, could you drop me home actually? You live in West too? Okay, cool." And at that point I felt more safe getting into some like random dude's car. And then in the car journey, we found some common ground, and I like started playing him some demos. I wasn't even trying to pitch to him an artist that he had just signed called Saya Gray, who's amazing. I was about to drop a song that she had like done some bass line on, and so I played him an unreleased demo, and then I played him the next one. And then it just so happened that I dropped that, like, oh yeah, my deal with Marathon was coming to an end. He was like, oh really? I thought you signed an album deal with them. And I was like, no, it's just a 2 EP deal. And he was like, interesting. He drops me home. And then within the next day, my manager got an email from him. And now I'm signed to the label.
That's kooky. I can't imagine any other scenario where I'd get in a car with a stranger unless it was to like unintentionally get an album, a record deal. That's
I
crazy.
mean, yeah, it was like there was a fuel shortage. There was like I couldn't hail a cab. This guy I like had never met but had known from online had like was going my way, and then it turns out, yeah, like he ran the label that I was going to sign to. Yeah, pretty serendipitous, to be honest.
That's the word for it, serendipitous. If you don't
Mm.
mind me sharing, what was the demo that you shared with them? Does it show up on the album?
No, so it was that the very first demo was what was going to be one of my like last releases on Marathon, which was Vest and Boxers and Don't Come Back, and both of those had the bass line played by Saya Gray. So it was like an artist he had just signed. So that was like the link was like, oh, you just signed this person. I'm about to drop 2 songs. But I had 2 other demos that weren't going on the Marathon project, and one of them was Push and Shove, which is I think track 3 or 4 on the album, and I played that to him in the car as well. And yeah, and he got to release it onto his label.
Man, that's awesome. How does that process work? Do you just kind of like, I know most artists typically have their demo saved on their phone. Was it like a one of those awkward moments where it was like, oh, can I connect to the aux? Like, let me just like play it to your ear while you drive, or
Oh yeah, no, I just carry like physical vinyls with me with like one of those little briefcases, and I just like opened it up on my lap, and like every time would go over a speed bump, it'd be like that.
spoken like a true artist. I love it. Please correct me on the name if I mispronounce it. Let's talk 9/8.
Yep,
You are
both you
the
pronounced the word 9 and the word 8 perfectly.
just double checking. You
That was
never
really
know.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Now, you're the brainchild of this collective, gathering acts from all over London for different creative avenues, one of which is 9/8 Fest, which is coming up in October. Now,
Mm.
please correct me if I'm wrong. You're going on its third year because this is not its first time being the 9/8. It's not your first time putting on the 9/8
No,
Fest.
yeah, we're back and we're bigger than better, baby. Alliteration. We're back and we're bigger and better than ever.
Perfect. Now, with more and more artists emerging with their own festival, to you, why is it important to eventually start your own festival or event series?
Yeah, like I think a lot of artists are starting their own festival and events because you can really feel the difference when an event lineup is being curated by an artist versus when it's being curated by bookers. Sometimes I look at lineups and I'm like, huh, this lineup is so weird, or like this isn't really like fusing a vibe. And I think that's because there's so much politics that goes on with like bookers of like, hey, I got you this thing, could you get my eyes on this? Or like the headliner's playing, and to like book that headliner, we're also gonna book like somebody else who's also on that like label management company, because then we're more likely for them to like let us book the head. Like all this fucking politics, right? Sorry, I don't know if I can swear, you can beat me out. All these bloody politics. And when something is curated by an artist, you can actually see like the scene around it. So a really good example, I think, maybe on an American side is like Camp Flognor, which is curated by Tyler the Creator. And like, you know, I'm sure there's lots of people on his like team that help him like do all of it. It's not him, but there's instantly a kind of like scene and a vibe and a subculture like connected to the lineup every year. And so yeah, I think in our own way we wanted to, like, me and my friends just wanted to book what we were listening to and have a night. And so if you look at like the history of, I can only really speak a lot for London because that's where I'm from, like events and sort of like festival lineups, they used to be tied to a specific like subculture. So, you know, you'd have the ravers, the punks, the emos, and you get a bit of that now, but it's so watered down by bookers. With artists doing it now, you get that like subcultures going to specific events. And for us, it's a very sort of like underground London rave meets punk, sort of like culture clash meets like indie, and it's like, yeah, it's the way we can like merge that like subculture that we're part of in a real life event, basically. That was the yeah, the full, well, TED talk. Sorry, that was long.
No worries. Thank you for your elevator pitch. So now I will be traveling to London to attend this one.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Wanted to ask you, because the 9/8 Collective, they're all friends, colleagues that you've met just over the span since the start of your career.
Mhm.
So, what was that initial push? Because I know most events are especially with your guys' parties that you throw, they're more of like, this is me and my buddies. We like to make music and we're super artsy. So we're just gonna go and plan these events. Like, what was the push for you to be like, you know what, let's do a festival?
Um, we just thought it'd be really fun, to be honest. Like, we had the opportunity to take over like one of London's most like famous kind of rave and club spaces called Fabric. Fabric has like a huge history with like, yeah, the rave community. And when we took it over, we were able to program like multiple rooms and multiple stages happening at the same time. We'd kind of done like things like that before, but that was the first time that we really like was like, this is really cool. And yeah, it was just for the fun of it. It was essentially creating a space that we didn't have before. I've always, all my life, as someone who listens to all genres, if I'm paying like more than like £20 for a night, $20, I want to be able to not have to just like listen to like techno or just one thing. Like, I want to be able to get the whole range. I've always wanted to walk into one room and it's like drum and bass, jungle, like, you know, happy hardcore, like rave music, and then I walk into another room and an indie band are playing. And then we just wanted to like provide that, but for like, yeah, a specific scene that we feel part of.
Thank you for sharing that. Like, I consider myself a casual fan, but it was during this deep dive where I learned all the lore and all and like you've been performing and kind of putting on raves and DJing raves since you were like younger, especially within Tokyo. Now, hearing you talk about putting on specific acts and that are performing jungle, techno, hardcore, like, do you feel that there's been a shift in rave culture since the time that you've been playing?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. There's been a huge shift and revival in rave culture and rave music. And yeah, like dance centric music, but also like the kind of aesthetic around rave kind of coming to the forefront. And obviously, you know, from like Charlie XCX Brat to like, you know, the Pink Panthers phenomenon, like it's such a great example of this sort of like rave revival. And it's been amazing for me to watch. I'm someone where I come from like a rave family, like both my parents met on the 90s rave scene. And so it's been interesting seeing like it, you know, people who were actually part of it when it was like first a thing versus like seeing the revival now. And yeah, we've just got a whole new generation that wants to feel connected to that. And I think it's also a result of like the post-pandemic generation. It's like, we can get out now. I want to get out. I want to dance the night away. I want to like, yeah, there's something quite yeah, just very beautiful about that.
Thank you for sharing. Funny that you brought up Charlie XCX. Are you bumping that?
That's a good little joke you did there. Yeah, I am.
Thank you.
I think it's just, yeah, it's one of those records that definitely we're gonna look at like this year, and it's already
Mhm.
like put itself as one of those records that was really defining for the year. And I think it's so cool to have that. It makes everyone feel like they're part of, you know, something. I remember back in '84. I remember back in 24. You know, it's gonna be like that. That Brett album.
I was
Yeah.
I was doing a little key. It's okay.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly.
there was a tweet I saw from a friend who was very deep into the rave DJ culture within LA for these last few years, talking about how COVID was going to transform that scene because since you weren't at the time when you weren't able to do all these big, large crowd gatherings for shows, it was going to start a chain of people doing more isolated secret shows. Now, that was the case for the States. Did you also experience that for your own shows?
Yeah, there was also just like a lot of, yeah, secret shows. There was a lot of illegal raves. There was a lot of like forest parties. oh, there was so many forest parties in London during lockdown. It was mental. Yeah, there was just like it did revive a lot of like counterculture activities because if you restrict any form of like partying in any way, you know, it just creates like more underground ways to do that. And a lot of people did rebel against the restrictions.
I can only imagine what the forest party must have been like.
Yeah, they were jokes. They were really, really jokes. Yeah.
Going back to 9/8 earlier in the conversation, was it difficult for you focusing on your own project while writing and recording the newest EP they dropped as a collective this year?
Not at all. It was really nice. Like, I think I was actually in my mixing um period when we started, like when we did the 9/8 stuff. So I was mixing my debut album and then we went on like a big sort of like writing trip. And when 9/8 write, like recently we just got on a holiday. So we just went to Wales in the countryside, book a little cabin farmhouse. Everyone's either in like bunk beds or staying in a cabin house, and then we wake up, we go straight into the studio. Someone cooks breakfast, somebody does some barbecue food or a roast. We go for a hike, and then we make more music. So it was like super. It was like, you know, 9/8 stuff is refuge. It's just hanging out with my friends, and music is the product of us hanging out.
Thank you for sharing that with me. Now, moving on, you're no stranger to expanding your creative horizons beyond music to the realms of videography and modeling, but you ventured deeper into the fashion world with the Lava Land times Lazy Oath collaboration. It was really cool. I was checking it out last night. I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to collab with Lazy Oath in particular?
I knew that I wanted to start doing collabs with brands, and I think like Lavaland as a brand on the fashion side is something where it's like it's very much my own little like startup company. And I think the best way to learn how to operate is like working with brands who sort of like operate at a level that I, you know, yeah, want to be at. I learned a lot from like designing like a capsule collection with them and just working with their team. They've been around since like 2003 or something, and are a really great team of, I think, pretty much all women, from what I can remember. And it was just cool. Yeah. And the opportunity came up, and it was really great working with them. I learned a lot, and the result was really cool.
I wanted to ask, what was your favorite thing or product, I should say, or your favorite piece to design with them?
It was there was it has to be two. There was two that I was really like, you know, we I really wanted to get it right. The first one was a little like crossbody bag that was made out of puffer material. And so it was like the puffer bag, like a cool unisex puffer bag that you just like you'd wear it to a festival or whatever. But the silhouette and the shape of it was really cool and spacey. And then the second one was this like faux mohair cardigan that the design on it was like the interior of a lava lamp, but all of like the little like bits of the lava lamp had little smiley faces on it, but the whole material is like super fluffy, super heavyweight, like just the most comfortable cardigan in the world. And it just like made me realize that I wanted like my lava lamp merch to be more than just t-shirt and hoodies. I wanted it to be stuff that's like really nice material, stuff that I generally would wear. And yeah, I've just released like a track jacket with Lava Lands that I designed, and it's like what my main character in the album wears throughout like the storyline. And it's nice that people can wear what I'm wearing. I think that's cooler, right? Instead of merch with just the artist's name on it, isn't it cooler to actually wear what your favorite artist would wear?
Most definitely. To have the bit integrated in, like, to other people too. It's crazy.
Mhm.
Now, yeah, so seeing you do this fashion collab and now you're out here creating, like, very, like, creative styles of clothing, but also you've done a lot of directing work with, Wet Leg. And aside from the music, you now have these multiple ventures, or I should say, these avenues of creation with your art. I wanted to ask, out of all of these avenues, which do you feel gives you the most creative freedom?
All of them have to exist for me to have creative freedom. I think that when I start getting into a rut, a creative rut, or I'm like maybe stuck with like the music, or I've listened to something too many times, I need to be able to like move on to working on the visuals. And when I'm like stuck with the visuals, or I'm waiting for someone to get back to me, like I then will move on to the clothing line. And it creates this sort of like cycle where I can always keep myself inspired and be excited about something, because I'm like not just sort of getting stuck with one thing. And by the time I go back to the original thing, I'm like fresh with ideas. They all inform each other, and they all need to be there to create that, like, that equilibrium.
It's another good word, equilibrium. I like that.
Mm.
Now, entering the actual nitty gritty of the album itself, you've collaborated with so many aspiring artists since your first formation of 9/8, and there's a lot of eclectic features present on the album itself. Which artist was the most difficult to link up with for location's sake, and which made you the most like excited to work with?
um That's a good question. Like, no artist was like overly difficult to sort of like link up with. Even the artists that are like super far away, some artists like sent over their bits from South Korea, some artists sent over their bits from LA. I think the funniest one was there's a song called Change. And on the introduction of that song, it must be like track 10 or track 11. I might be wrong. It's around that part of the album. On the intro of that song, I had asked Courtney Love to say like some words from like a script, and like it was so funny. She like did it. She was like super down. I'd like met her backstage at an event, and she had like shouted me out the next day. But that was a funny one to orchestrate, because I was, aside from meeting her, I also had like a mutual friend, and then I was like texted my girlfriend to text him to text Courtney to ask if she wanted to be on my song. And then Courtney texted him to then text my girlfriend to then text me back, being like, yeah, sure, I'm down to be on the song. And then I could have just went direct to that point, but I was just like, fuck it, okay. So then I sent the demo to my girlfriend to send to him to send to Courtney, and then Courtney recorded her thing and then sent it back to him to send to my girlfriend to send back to me. So that was probably the most like funniest way I've ever like got somebody's like voice on my records, but it worked. And yeah, I was getting like a chain of voice notes of like her listening to like the song on my album, being like, oh, this is what I think. And it was going through like 4 people, but it was like directly to me, like addressed to me.
Man, it's another serendipitous moment of just coming full circle with Courtney Love. That's so funny. I didn't even
Yeah.
recognize her voice. That's crazy.
Yeah, we
That's
had
so
we had
amazing.
fucked around with that. I put it through like this little like space echoey like hardware to make it sound. But like when you hear it and you know it's her, like you really like it's definitely, yeah, it's very Courtney. She's reading a script from a film, and it's like a monologue by Al Pacino about like getting like, yeah, fucked over by the man. But yeah, yeah, listen to it again with that context.
For sure. That's exactly what I'm about to do after this. Shout out Courtney Love. If you're watching this, Courtney, shout out. Now, let's actually get into it. So let's talk Starface. I immediately thought of Bowie as a point of influence, just in terms of the concept or the bit, but I want to know more about what inspired this.
Yeah, I think I always knew for my debut album I wanted to like create a storyline. And I think like, yeah, for future projects and past projects that I've done, it's always just been like, how can I make this sound really cool? And with this album, it was beyond that. I was like, I really want there to be like a world that people can follow. But first and foremost, the songs need to be good. I don't want to be so wrapped up on the concept that I can't, the songs are just like rubbish to listen to out of context. But yeah, it's just something I like literally always knew I wanted to do. Like I love being able to listen to a project and like follow the law, and I wanted that.
So what was it like? What was the bit, or what started the bit itself from its original creation, inception of just being like star on my face?
Yeah, it was an alter ego I found myself sort of like slipping into when I went on stage, when I performed. Like I started performing and I'd like sometimes put draw the star on, and most artists will know when you're on tour for a while, no matter how insane that person is moving. When you've been on tour for a while, you go into autopilot. The same way with like sometimes when you're at work or when you're, you just find yourself and you're like, you've done it. But like on tour, it's like, it really is like Groundhog Day as well, where you're like playing the same set and the same order. Sometimes there's a bit in the performance where you like say that same line or say that same joke because like, the bands have it written down of like, this is the part where we need to like tune up. So this is the part where you maybe say this to the crowd or whatever. And I kept on slipping into a character, and that character was Starface. And is like when you're on autopilot, like that muscle memory in your subconscious takes over, but sometimes something else takes over. Sometimes people would like show me videos of the performance and I'll be moving around or I'll be like interacting with someone or jumping into the crowd, whatever, and I'll be like, I was there but I wasn't there. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, like you're like it's almost like those adrenaline rushes where you don't remember, and it's like, oh, I was a completely different person for that moment.
Yeah, but what if that person was like an alien that possessed you? Like, what if that person was actually a completely different entity who's like through the vessel of your body just experiencing humanity, but as something from other?
Do you feel like the music that was written for this project was written by you, or do you feel like a part of it mainly came from this persona of Starface?
It was both. There was for every song there's two storylines. There's a storyline of the persona and contextualizing that persona and adding to that like narrative. And that's a mixture of different experiences and different people I've met and different characters that I've like watched in films or on TV. But then there's the storyline that is really what I went through. That like, whether it's a love song or whether it's a sad song or, there's always like multiple things happening when you're listening to that song to a song on the record.
A lot of different songs to kind of come back to and just to re-listen for a different concept. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I noticed that Renegade isn't on the album, and it definitely incorporates the Starface concept. So, it was just like what you're saying earlier about how there are some songs that you drafted, and they're all during the arc of this bit.
Yeah, I think like Renegades is in Starface's world, but it was just like a little prologue. It's not part of the main story of the book. It was like the little preface. Is that what it's called? I don't know. It's just like that little, little chapter right at the beginning. That's not really a chapter.
Yeah, kind of like a teaser in a way.
It was more like a pilot episode.
I like that. Pilot
Yeah.
episode. I also really like the concept art you have for that for that single cover.
Mm.
Did you was that did that go into the concept at all of like kind of thinking of it as like as like an interstellar movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Now, my friend, my final question for you is, what makes you feel most alienated in this day of age, and how can that be a good thing?
I think that in terms of being alienated, I feel like a lot of people feel alienated. I feel like we live in a time where um, division tactics are kind of used for people to like remain in power. So by making everyone feel like nobody can get along, you've got like the ultra left and the ultra right and incels online and liberals who just want to cancel each other out. I think we live in a time where like you kind of go online and you see all this stuff and it feels very like, damn, the world is so doomed and this is really isolating and how can I find any joy? But I actually like in those moments feel even more determined to be like, I actually don't buy into that. I don't buy into the fact that we're all so different and we all can't get along. I think that's just like an agenda where like we're purposely made to sort of like be in an environment where we bicker with each other. And it makes me even more determined to like show people that we have more common grounds. And yeah, there's like a lot happening in like UK politics at the moment. We've just had like a completely new party after like over a decade of like conservative rule. And yeah, just all throughout, I like look around in this country, and I think like a lot of the working class are pitted against each other. And every time I see that, I should feel isolated, but I don't. It just makes me so determined to be like, guys, we are the ones that should be pairing up with each other, like not these dudes. So yeah.
Starface is for the working class. I fuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah. Well, that tends. I think that's all. Those are all the questions I have. So
Great.
I'm gonna wrap that up right there. Thank you so much, Lava. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for your words of insight. Thank you for the words of wisdom and just letting me in on the bit. And I'm very excited for people to listen in on what you've created. Congratulations. It's a wonderful project. And do you have any other questions, comments, concerns?
What is EARMILK backwards?
What is ear milk backwards? Oh, I think someone. It's drummer's ear. It's drummer's ear.
Okay, sweet.
No,
Cool.
heighten the ear.
Kilmray. All right.
It works. Thank you, Lava.
Thank you.